There's a version of Bill Cipher the show has never shown you directly. Not the cartoon triangle with the stick arms and the top hat. Not the punchline villain who cheers and grins and makes terrible puns in the face of everyone who tries to stop him. Not even the apocalyptic god who vaporizes the time baby in about 4 seconds of casual violence at the start of the Weirdmageddon arc. There is an older version of Bill, a stranger one, the version that has been quietly operating across dozens of civilizations for over 1 trillion years before a single frame of Gravity Falls ever aired. And almost nobody gives that version the attention it deserves. Tonight we are going through all of it. Every layer of his intelligence, from the very first mutation that set him apart from everyone he ever knew, through centuries of manipulation and failed portal attempts and civilizations used as raw material for a plan he has been running since before human history began, all the way to the thing he whispered backwards as he was erased in the series finale, which is either the saddest moment in the entire show or the most frightening thing about it, depending on how you choose to sit with it. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, we will be here for a while, and if you have not subscribed to Pine Hat yet, it really does help us keep making these. The first level of Bill Cipher's intelligence is the one that none of the others are possible without, and it has nothing to do with magic or deals or manipulation or any of the things we usually reach for when we talk about what makes Bill dangerous. The first level is perception, specifically the ability to see something that no one else around you can see, and to understand what that means for the rest of your existence. Over 1 trillion years before the events of Gravity Falls, before Stanford Pines was born, before Gravity Falls, Oregon existed, before the United States was founded, before recorded human history began, before most of the life that has ever existed on this planet even appeared, there was a universe called Euclydia. Euclydia was a 2-dimensional universe, flat in the most complete sense of the word, the kind of flat that makes our 3-dimensional intuitions not just useless, but entirely inapplicable. Every being in Euclydia was flat. They moved along a plane, saw along a plane, thought along a plane, and the concept of any direction that was not along that surface was not just unknown to them. It was inconceivable in the most literal possible sense. You cannot imagine what you have never experienced and have no sensory apparatus to detect. The beings of Euclydia had no such apparatus. They were limited to a world of 2 dimensions, and they had built their entire civilization inside those limits. Their language, their philosophy, their sense of self, all of it perfectly and completely contained within a flat plane, and all of it as internally consistent and meaningful as any civilization we have ever known. They were not lesser beings for their flatness. They were simply beings whose reality stopped at a boundary they had no way to perceive. And then Bill was born with an eye that was too large. That sounds anticlimactic when you put it that way. Too large. But the size of Bill's eye was not a cosmetic difference, not a variation within the expected range of Euclidean development. It was a structural genetic mutation that gave him something nobody else in his entire universe possessed, the ability to perceive depth, the ability to look at the flat plane of Euclydia and see, faintly, imperfectly, tentatively, the direction that had no name. Up, the 3rd dimension, a direction that did not exist within the conceptual framework of every other Euclidean alive, a direction that, from the perspective of the civilization around him, the laws of their universe as they understood them made impossible. Think about what that actually means for a moment, and I want you to think about it slowly, because this is where Bill's story starts, and this is where it becomes genuinely interesting. You are a child. Everyone around you lives in a world you can also see, but you can see something more. There is a layer of reality sitting directly above everything, right there, immediately accessible to your senses, and no one else can detect it at all. You try to describe it. You try to point. You use words that have no equivalence in your language, because the thing you are describing has no name, no reference point, no cultural context anywhere in the world you were born into. And instead of being studied or celebrated or even simply believed, you are feared. Your mutation marks you as wrong, as broken, as something outside the acceptable range of what a being in this universe is supposed to be. The Book of Bill, published in July of 2024 by Alex Hirsch through Disney's publishing arm, describes the social reality of Bill's early life in Euclydia as one of isolation and rejection. His parents were among the very few who loved him despite what he was, or perhaps because of it. But the broader world treated him as an aberration, a child who could perceive a dimension that no one else in his universe even had a concept for, surrounded by a civilization that had built its entire understanding of existence on the premise that such a dimension was impossible, that such a direction could not exist. He was not simply the odd one out. He was, from the perspective of every being around him, a walking contradiction, an impossibility expressing itself in the wrong place. This is where the real foundation of his intelligence gets laid down, not in the perception itself, but in what that perception, combined with that very particular and sustained isolation, does to a mind over time. When you can see something nobody else believes in, when the direct evidence of your own senses contradicts the universal consensus of everyone around you, you develop a specific and lasting relationship with truth. You learn that consensus is not the same as accuracy. You learn that the certainty other people carry about the limits of reality is always, to some degree, just a product of their own sensory constraints, not a reflection of what actually is. You learn that the models other people hold of reality are always smaller than the reality those models are trying to describe, and that the people holding those models are often most confident precisely in the areas where they are most wrong. That is a profound lesson for a child to absorb, and it is mostly correct, and the conclusion it leads to is one that a certain kind of mind in a certain kind of pain could very easily reach. If other people's models of reality are always incomplete, then other people's moral frameworks are products of the same limitation. Their ethics are as flat as their world. Their values are constrained by what they can perceive, just as their physics is. And why should a being who can see the third dimension feel bound by the moral conclusions of beings who cannot even conceive of it? Why should their judgment carry weight with someone who knows, from direct and unavoidable personal experience, that their judgment is built on an incomplete picture of existence? I want to be clear that this is my reading, rather than anything the show states directly. But the shape of this reasoning seems to me like the most honest account of what the lore is building toward. Bill is not born evil, he is born different, and he is punished for being different, and the lesson he takes from that punishment is one that a very specific kind of brilliant, isolated, wounded intelligence could take. That other people are limited, that their judgments are not binding on someone who can see more than they can, that the frameworks they build to understand existence are the frameworks of beings with fundamentally restricted perception, and therefore not frameworks that apply to him, not rules he broke, rules he simply never accepted as applying. Then comes the moment that makes everything else possible, the thing Bill himself seems unable to fully account for in his own memory. Sometime in those early eons of Euclidia's history, Bill tries to share what he sees. He tries to show his people the third dimension, the direction that has been there above them all along, perfectly real and perfectly accessible to his perception, and completely invisible to everyone else around him. He wants to give them what he has. And in doing so, whether deliberately or by accident, and the show and the Book of Bill are genuinely ambiguous on this point, he destroys Euclydia entirely. Every being in it. His parents, the people who had loved him, everything, gone. This event is called the Euclidean Massacre in the lore, and the way Bill relates to it afterward is one of the stranger and more unsettling threads in all of the Gravity Falls mythology. The character shows an ongoing inability to fully account for the details of what happened that day. He continues, even in what we get of his own internal voice in the Book of Bill, to express something like denial about Euclidia's fate. The show and the book leave it deliberately unclear whether this is genuine trauma that has been buried so deep it no longer registers as trauma, whether it is guilt that has curdled over 1 trillion years into something that no longer resembles guilt at all, or whether it is simply the psychology of a being who decided at some point in the vast stretch of time that followed that the deaths of others have no moral claim on him, and who is therefore genuinely unable to process those deaths as loss in any conventional sense. The ambiguity is the point. The show does not want you to know whether Bill is a monster who chose to destroy his world, or a damaged child who could not control what his gift did. Maybe it is both. Maybe, after 1 trillion years, the distinction has stopped mattering even to him. What is not ambiguous is what comes next. After the destruction of Euclydia, Bill enters the Nightmare Dimension. The Nightmare Dimension is a lawless and unstable crawlspace between worlds, a formless void where physical laws simply do not apply in any reliable way. There is no up or down in any meaningful sense. There is no reliable causality. There is no structure, no order, no rule that holds from one moment to the next. It is the exact inverse of Euclidia's rigid two-dimensional existence, and it is in this space that Bill spends what the lore implies is an extraordinarily long period before his schemes on Earth begin in earnest. Here is the thing that gets me about the nightmare dimension, the thing I think is crucial and that tends to get glossed over when people talk about this part of the lore. Bill does not merely survive in it. The show implies he is genuinely at home there in a way he never was in Euclydia, because the nightmare dimension offers him something his original universe never could: a space with no rules at all, a being who has already concluded that other people's frameworks for reality are always smaller than reality itself, who has already lived through the full experience of being punished for seeing more than his world could accommodate, is not going to be troubled by the absence of a framework. He is going to find freedom in it. The formlessness that would be terrifying to a being who depended on structure is, for Bill, the natural state. It matches the inside of his mind. The chaos of the nightmare dimension is not something he has to endure. It is something he settles into, stretches out in, uses as raw material for thinking. He has all the time in the universe, and no rules about what to do with it. This is the first level of his intelligence, and I keep coming back to it because I think it is the one that gets most consistently underestimated in discussions of the character. When we talk about Bill Cipher, we tend to reach for his manipulation, his deal-making, his ability to find and apply pressure on the exact weaknesses of every person he encounters, his long-term plotting across human civilization, what he does during Weirdmageddon. All of that is real, all of that matters, but all of it is downstream of this first thing. Bill Cipher is a being who learned, before the age of adulthood in his own species, that the most universally held model of reality was wrong. He learned this not from a book or a teacher or a theory, but from his own body, from the direct and unavoidable evidence of his own perception, and he paid an extraordinary price for being right. From that point forward, for the entirety of the 1+ trillion years that followed, every model of reality anyone tried to present to him, every assumption anyone made about what was possible or impossible, every limit anyone tried to enforce, he filtered through that foundational understanding. Limits are almost always just the product of limited perception. The people who told Euclidia's Bill that there was no third dimension were not malicious. They were telling him the truth as they could access it. They were simply wrong about the nature of truth, and their wrongness had serious consequences, and Bill watched it all from a perceptual vantage point that none of them shared, and he drew the obvious conclusion, and he has been drawing the same conclusion about every being he has encountered in the trillion years since. When you watch him operate in Gravity Falls, when you watch him profile Ford Pines' loneliness with such precision that he can sustain a relationship built on apparent understanding for long enough to get a portal built, when you watch him identify Mabel's specific private anxiety about the end of summer from what looks like a single conversation, you are watching a being who has spent an incomprehensibly long time in a formless space, thinking, perceiving, running models, building an understanding of how beings with limited perceptions make their decisions, where those decisions are most fragile, and exactly how to apply pressure at the precise right point. The perceptual mutation that made him a pariah in Euclydia is the seed of every skill we see him demonstrate across 2 seasons of Gravity Falls. Seeing what others cannot see, understanding what others cannot understand, operating at a level of abstraction that makes the ordinary constraints of other beings look, to him, like the geometry of Euclydia looked to its inhabitants, like the entire shape of reality, from the inside, without any awareness of what lies just above. The first level of Bill Cipher's intelligence is dimensional. It is perceptual. It is the foundation on which every other level rests, and it began with an eye that was too large in a universe that was too flat, in a world that no longer exists. The second level is the one most visible in the show, and the one that made Bill famous as a villain long before the finale gave him his full set of powers to work with. This level is psychological intelligence, and what it means in Bill's case is something much more specific than just being clever about people. It means having a near-perfect model of any given person's deepest needs and most private fears, and being able to apply that model with almost no friction, no visible calculation, no warm-up period. He does not seem to be reading people when you watch him. He seems to already know them, completely, as if he checked the answers before the test started. The show gives us 4 principal targets for this ability across its run, and they are worth examining one by one because the differences between them reveal just how sophisticated his profiling actually is. This is not a one-size approach. This is a system that adapts its angle entirely to the specific contours of the specific person. Each target gets a different play, built from the ground up around exactly what that target cannot resist. Ford Pines is the most important target in the long run, and the most interesting one to think about, because Bill got to Ford years before the events of the show even begin. What Ford Pines was, in the period before the series, was a physicist. A genuine one. Not a dabbler, not a hobbyist, but a serious academic whose work was legitimately attempting to answer questions at the edge of what physics understood. He also had an anomaly, 6 fingers on one hand, a mutation that had marked him as strange and set him apart from ordinary people for his entire life. He was the kind of person whose intellectual gifts far outpaced the social context around him, who had spent years being misunderstood or kept at arm's length, who had built a career on the back of an exceptional mind and a willingness to pursue questions that other physicists were not taking seriously. And he was lonely in the specific way that very intelligent people who feel fundamentally unlike their peers are lonely. Not for lack of wanting connection, but because the gap between what they see and what the people around them see is wide enough to make genuine intimacy feel perpetually slightly out of reach. Bill saw all of that. And Bill did not approach Ford as a threat or an obstacle or a minor convenience. He approached Ford as a partner, as a collaborator, as a being who was genuinely interested in the same questions Ford was working on and who found Ford's particular mind fascinating and worth engaging with. He helped Ford solve equations that had stopped him cold. He offered directions Ford had not considered. He made Ford feel, for perhaps the first time, genuinely recognized by another intelligence that could actually follow what he was doing. The show's second season, in the episode A Tale of Two Stands, gives us Ford's account of how this relationship developed, and the detail that stands out to me is how sustained and patient the approach was. This was not a quick manipulation. This was a slow, careful, attentive relationship built over months or years, calibrated precisely to what Ford needed at each stage. The recognition felt real to Ford because, in a narrow and uncomfortable sense, it was real. Bill genuinely grasped what Ford's mind was doing. He could follow the work. He could engage with it. The investment was not real, but the understanding behind it was acute, and that is what made it work. You cannot fake recognition of someone's specific intellectual life to a person who has never felt genuinely recognized, without either actually understanding that life or being so precisely calibrated to its surface signals that the difference is undetectable. Bill could do both. Then there is Gideon Gleeful, who represents a completely different kind of target and a completely different kind of play. Where Ford was a genius who needed recognition, Gideon is a child with a grandiose self-image and an obsessive attachment to Mabel Pines. He is not particularly intelligent in a technical sense. He is not lonely in any deep or private way. He is consumed by a very specific and surface-readable desire to have what he wants, to control the things and people around him, and to be seen as powerful. He approaches Bill with a summoning ritual, which already tells you something important about the dynamic he imagines he is establishing. Gideon thinks he is calling a servant. He thinks he is in charge of this transaction. Bill is perfectly happy to let him think that, because a mark who believes they are in control is a mark who will not take precautions. What Bill offers Gideon in their first significant exchange in Dreamscaperers, the 19th episode of the first season aired July 12, 2013, is exactly what Gideon needs in that moment. Access to Stan Pines' mind, specifically the combination to the safe that holds the deed to the Mystery Shack. Gideon wants the shack and he wants influence over Mabel, and both of those things flow from controlling the shack. Bill gives him the tools to pursue that goal immediately and concretely. In return, Gideon agrees, without fully understanding the scope of what he is agreeing to help Bill with unspecified plans in the future. A blank check deal. The details of what Gideon is signing up for are left deliberately vague, and Gideon, blinded by the immediate gratification of getting what he wants right now, does not press for specifics. He has agreed to something whose scope he cannot imagine, in exchange for something he can see and touch and use today. Bill knows he will do this, because Gideon's psychology makes him almost incapable of doing otherwise. He cannot think long-term when a short-term prize is in front of him. Bill can, and does, and will. The episode is also where we get our first clear look at Bill's relationship with the whole architecture of the show's universe, because it takes place inside Stan's mindscape. The Gravity Falls mindscape is a strange and malleable space, and Bill inside it is different from Bill as he appears in any other context. He is performatively playful, yes, charismatic and bizarre, and putting on a show. But underneath that performance there is something operating with surgical precision. He identifies every character he encounters, reads their motivations instantly, and adjusts his approach for each one in real time. Dipper he engages with as an intellectual near equal, playfully goading him. Susus he largely ignores as not worth the attention. Mabel he watches but does not yet engage directly, because she is not the target of this particular operation. The calibration is constant and effortless, and it looks, from the outside, like casual confidence. It is actually something much more like a machine running. Then there is Dipper Pines himself. Dipper is 12 years old at the start of the series, and he is desperate in the particular way that smart children surrounded by mysteries are desperate. He needs to understand things. He needs to know. Not having the answer to a question is a kind of pain for Dipper, and this is true of small mysteries and large ones equally. The journals and the supernatural activity of Gravity Falls are not just interesting to him. They feel urgent, personally significant, like something he is supposed to figure out. Add to this the fact that Dipper consistently feels underestimated by the adults around him, that he is almost always the youngest and least physically capable person in any situation he cares about, and you have a target with a very specific and very exploitable vulnerability. He can be pushed into bad decisions by a combination of intellectual urgency and the need to prove that he belongs in the room. This is exactly what Bill does in Sock Opera, the 4th episode of the 2nd season, and it is worth going through in some detail because it is probably the cleanest demonstration we get of Bill's psychological intelligence operating in real time. Dipper has found a laptop belonging to the author, but it is password protected, and it is going to erase itself if the password is entered incorrectly too many times. He is frantic. The knowledge on that laptop feels enormous and important, and he is about to lose it through ignorance alone. And that is the moment Bill appears and makes an offer. He will give Dipper the password. All he needs in return is a puppet. The word puppet, stated plainly to your face, should be alarming, and Dipper knows it should be. He hesitates. He thinks about it. But the laptop is right there, and the password is right there, and the knowledge he needs is right there, and the abstract danger of agreeing to give Bill a puppet feels smaller in that moment than the very concrete and immediate urgency of what he is about to lose. Bill knows this will happen. He has read Dipper precisely enough to know that the intellectual urgency will win over the caution in this particular window of desperation. He gives Dipper the password. He takes possession of Dipper's body. And he nearly succeeds in making that arrangement permanent by destroying the physical body and trapping Dipper's consciousness in the mindscape indefinitely. The plan fails not because Bill's psychological read was wrong, but because Mabel does something he did not fully account for. She chooses Dipper's safety over her puppet show at a moment when the emotional cost of that choice is very high, and she uses the advantage of physical unpredictability and a willingness to hurt the body she loves to drive Bill out. The psychology was right. The profiling was accurate. Bill was simply dealt a variable he had not modeled correctly. We will come back to that variable, because it is the same one that ends him in the finale. And then there is Mabel. Mabel Pines is the most interesting target from a psychological standpoint because her manipulation, which takes place in Dipper and Mabel vs. the Future, the 17th episode of the 2nd season, aired October 12, 2015, involves disguise rather than direct confrontation. Bill does not approach Mabel as Bill. He disguises himself as Blendon Blandon, the time-traveling government agent who is a recurring minor character in the show, and he exploits something very specific about where Mabel is emotionally in that episode, her anxiety about the end of summer. Mabel knows, consciously or not, that the summer is running out. She knows that when it ends, she and Dipper will return to their regular lives, and that things will not be the same. She does not know exactly how or in what way, but she can feel the weight of it. It is that particular grief that comes before a loss you can see coming but cannot stop. Bill, appearing as a friendly and sympathetic figure, offers her something designed to address exactly that grief, a snow globe containing a fantasy world where summer never ends. He frames the interdimensional rift, the last remnant of the portal that Ford built and then destroyed, as simply part of a deal that will give her what she needs. Mabel takes the rift and hands it over, without realizing what it is or who she is talking to. What I find most striking about this particular manipulation is how different it is from everything else Bill does with the other targets. It is not built on intellectual urgency like Dipper's. It is not built on the desire for power and control like Gideon's. It is not the slow cultivation of a genius's trust like Ford's. It is built on something quieter and sadder, and in some ways harder to profile accurately. A young girl's grief about something that has not happened yet. The end of something beautiful. Bill saw that specific, tender, private anxiety, dressed it up in a friendly face and a familiar voice, and used it to remove from the board the single most important object in the show, without that person ever knowing she had been manipulated. By the time anyone realizes what happened, it is already done. This is the second level, and the thing I want to be clear about is that Bill is not a talented manipulator, the way a skilled con artist is a talented manipulator. A skilled con artist has a repertoire of approaches and applies them strategically based on target assessment. What the show gives us in Bill is something more unsettling. A being who does not appear to need a repertoire because he already understands, with near-complete accuracy, what each specific person needs and fears and cannot resist, before he has done anything that would count as research by ordinary standards. The read comes first. The deal is designed around the read, and each deal is precisely calibrated to the exact shape of that specific person's specific weakness. There is one more element of the psychological level worth discussing at some length, and it is the one that gets the most attention in fan discussions, and that is also the most commonly misunderstood. This is the question of whether Bill can lie. The popular fan theory, based on observed patterns in the show, is that Bill cannot outright lie, that he works through technical truths and loopholes and exploits the gap between what he says and what the listener assumes he means. The most cited example is the Gideon deal in Dreamscaperers. Gideon asks Bill to go into Stanford Pines' mind. Bill goes into Stan Pines' mind. Stan is not Stanford, the twin brother. Bill never claimed he would enter Stanford's mind specifically. He exploited the imprecision of Gideon's request, honored the letter of the deal while completely ignoring its intent, and by the technical terms of the agreement did nothing wrong. This is a real and observable pattern, but I want to be honest that the cannot lie framing is fan theory rather than confirmed canon. And Alex Hirsch has indicated in interviews that Bill is willing to betray deals entirely when he gets bored, which suggests the rule is not an absolute constraint. What seems more accurate to me is that Bill prefers exploiting loopholes because it is cleaner and strategically superior. It leaves the target feeling like they made their own choices. It maintains the appearance of a deal maker who can be trusted to fulfill his end of the bargain, at least technically, which makes future deals possible. Maintaining that reputation as a reliable, if dangerous partner, is more valuable to him than the convenience of just lying outright, as long as the loopholes are available. When they are not, or when he gets bored, the reputation goes out the window too. The psychological level is what most people point to when they say Bill Cipher is a great villain, and they are right to point there. But it is worth understanding that the psychological read is not where his intelligence starts. It is built on top of the perceptual foundation we just talked about, and it is in service of the longer plan we will get to next. The profiles are the tool. The goal is something much larger and much older. The third level is the one that makes Bill genuinely alien as a villain, the quality that separates him from every other antagonist in animated television in a way that is hard to fully articulate until you actually sit with it. This level is temporal. It is strategic. It is historical in a sense that stretches the word almost to its breaking point, because the history in question does not fit in a textbook. This level is the intelligence of a being who plans not in years or decades but in thousands of years, who looks at a civilization of human beings and sees not what they can give him today, but what they might be able to build for him in a few centuries if he plants the right seeds right now. And who is willing to wait those centuries, to watch those civilizations rise and fall and rise again, running the same experiment with updated variables, catalog the results, and start again. Consider what we know about Bill's activities across human history. I want to be careful here about sourcing, because some of the most specific claims about what Bill did in historical periods come primarily from the Book of Bill rather than the main series, and the Book of Bill is narrated from Bill's own perspective, which is the perspective of a known manipulator who is actively trying to recruit the reader into a deal. These historical episodes are presented as Bill's own account of his own deeds, and Bill has no particular commitment to accuracy in his self-presentation when a more dramatic version serves his purposes better. So take the specific incidents with the appropriate degree of skepticism, but the broad pattern of behavior they describe is consistent with how the show presents him, and that pattern is what matters. The pattern is this. For thousands of years, across an extraordinary span of human history, Bill has been attempting to get someone to build him a portal, a bridge between the physical world and the nightmare dimension. Something that would allow the unreality and chaos of his native space to bleed into contact with physical existence, with the kinds of consequences that the Weirdmageddon arc makes graphically clear when the rift is finally broken in the second season. The specific attempts vary enormously in their approach and their raw materials, but the goal is always the same. Get someone with the knowledge and the ambition and the desperation to build the door, then walk through it. The earliest attempts, as Bill tells it, trace back to ancient Egypt, where a group with the knowledge to attempt a portal got it to function briefly before it closed. Bill's response to this near miss was to torment the builders with nightmares until they constructed stone monuments to him instead, which amounts to a temper tantrum followed by a propaganda campaign, but is also strategically sensible in its own way. If you cannot get what you want from this civilization right now, make sure they remember you and fear you, so that the next civilization that encounters the records of this one starts with some existing awareness of your existence. Plant seeds for the next iteration. The Aztec attempt, narrated in the Book of Bill, involved the sacrifice of thousands of people as the power source for a portal that ultimately failed to hold. The scale of this is worth sitting with for a moment. Thousands of lives used as fuel for an engineering experiment. Bill watching the attempt, collecting the data on why it failed, and then moving on to the next civilization. The sheer indifference required to view a mass death as a failed test run is not cruelty in the conventional sense. Cruelty implies you care enough to want suffering. This is something colder. It is the application of a truly alien moral framework, one in which the lives of beings with limited perception are the raw materials for experiments conducted by a being who operates on a different timescale entirely. The Dark Ages saw Bill working through what the lore refers to as medieval wizards, giving rise to traditions and superstitions that the show calls cipherstitions. The colonial period in New England saw another iteration. And then there is the Founding Fathers episode, which is the one that most people focus on because it connects Bill directly to the most famous version of his own image in the world, the Eye of Providence on the American dollar bill. Alex Hirsch has confirmed in interviews and behind-the-scenes material that Bill's design was directly inspired by the Eye of Providence, the pyramid and eye symbol that appears on the reverse of the dollar. The triangle with the eye. Bill is literally modeled on a piece of American currency, and the creator of the character named him Bill because of it. Within the show's universe, the connection runs deeper than visual homage. The Book of Bill describes Bill offering to help the Founding Fathers defeat the British in exchange for influence over the new government, being rejected, then tormenting them with nightmares until they agreed to place his image on the currency as a kind of compromise, a symbolic tribute that would stop the nightmares and give him something he valued almost as much as the portal: omnipresence. His image on every piece of paper currency in the country, his eye watching from every wallet, every cash register, every hand that accepted payment. And Bill, whose abilities include seeing through any depiction of himself, takes that very seriously. I want to flag this again as material from the Book of Bill rather than the main series, narrated by an unreliable source, with the caveats that involves. But even setting aside the specific historical incidents, even if some or all of them are exaggerations in Bill's self-serving narrative, the pattern they describe is the thing worth focusing on. Over thousands of years, across entirely different civilizations with entirely different technologies, languages, religions, and political structures, Bill has been running the same experiment. Find a civilization with the intellectual and material capacity to potentially attempt a portal. Identify the individuals within it most likely to have the combination of genius and ambition and desperation required to actually attempt it. Offer assistance. Take a cut in some form. Wait for the result. When it fails, catalog the failure, update the variables, and identify what conditions need to be different next time. Think about how many cycles of that there are. Think about how many civilizations rose and fell and were forgotten, while Bill was patiently iterating on his approach, each time getting a little closer to the right combination of tools and knowledge and human ambition, each time taking notes, each time updating his model of what does and does not work. Each failure is data. Each civilization that cannot quite produce the result is a data point informing the search for the one that eventually can. This is the intelligence of an optimizer with infinite time, a researcher who can literally wait through the entire span of human civilization while running experiments and recording outcomes. And the thing he identifies, after all those iterations, is that what he needs is not just resources or ambition, but a very specific configuration, a genius isolated enough to be hungry for recognition, technically skilled enough to actually solve the equations, in the right historical and material context, to have access to the tools the project requires, and carrying enough personal pain that the right kind of attention from an apparently sympathetic collaborator will feel like salvation rather than manipulation. He needs someone who is not quite like everyone else. Someone who has spent their life feeling fundamentally unlike the people around them. Someone who, when approached by a being who truly understands their mind and treats their work as the serious and extraordinary thing it is, will feel that recognition as a kind of homecoming, rather than immediately asking what the being is getting out of the arrangement. He has watched enough iterations to know exactly what that person looks and feels like from the outside. He has probably encountered multiple candidates who came close but fell short in one dimension or another. Then, in the mid-20th century, in the right place at the right time, he finds Stanford Pines. This is also the level that requires a quality we do not usually associate with the gleeful, chaotic, loudly performative Bill we see on screen. It requires discipline, real discipline, the kind that most human beings are not capable of maintaining across a single lifetime, let alone across the full span of recorded human civilization. Across all those centuries of failed attempts, Bill does not panic. He does not escalate unnecessarily into actions that would compromise the long-term project for short-term relief. He does not start making deals he cannot control, or taking actions that might alert other powerful cosmic entities to his presence before he is ready. He watches, he waits, he adjusts, he catalogs, he runs the next iteration with updated parameters. The chaos is a persona. The gleeful unpredictability he projects in every appearance in the show is a character. Underneath it is something very different, a patience so vast it operates on geological timescales, a discipline so deep it has been maintained across human civilizations, like a scientist maintains a longitudinal study. Not because Bill is naturally patient, but because the goal requires it, and because 1 trillion years of existence gives you a relationship with time that makes human lifetimes look like the tick of a clock. I find this the most genuinely alien aspect of Bill Cipher, more than the reality warping, more than the deal-making, more than the cosmic horror imagery of Weirdmageddon. It is the planning across thousands of years that I cannot quite get my head around from the inside. The idea of looking at ancient Egyptian portal attempts and thinking, interesting data point, catalog it, identify what was missing, look for the next opening in a few hundred years. The timescale is simply not commensurate with any human experience or any human intuition about what scheming looks like or how long it can be sustained. The most interesting corollary of this level, the one I keep returning to, is what it implies about the quality of intelligence required to pull off what he eventually does pull off. Consider the sheer number of variables in play across all those civilizations and all those iterations. The political circumstances, the technological capacity, the right combination of individuals in the right relationships, the absence of countervailing forces capable of stopping the project before completion. The optimization problem of finding all those variables in alignment across civilizations you are observing from outside is genuinely staggering, and Bill solved it. Not quickly, not easily, but he solved it, and the solution was Stanford Pines, and the specific tragedy of that solution is the subject of the next level. The third level of Bill's intelligence is also the level where his fatal flaw first becomes visible, though it takes a long time to see it clearly. The same patience and the same long view that make him so effective also make him brittle when the short-term situation goes wrong in ways his model did not anticipate. He can handle failure across millennia with equanimity. He is not as good at handling the unexpected in the moment, the variable that is not in the model, the human response that does not fit the pattern he has spent 1 trillion years refining. That brittleness will matter. It will matter enormously. But it does not matter yet, because the plan has not reached its final stage. The fourth level is the most concrete and in some ways the most legible one, because it shows up not as a pattern of behavior across centuries, but as a specific, verifiable action in living memory. Bill helps Stanford Pines build a machine that genuinely should not be possible. A portal between dimensions, a door connecting the physical world to the nightmare dimension, and the work required to build it is not hand-waved as magic or treated as a vague, mysterious thing the show gestures at from a distance. It is physics. It is mathematics. It is the kind of hard technical problem that Gravity Falls, to its enormous credit, treats with genuine respect. And the treatment of it as a real and difficult problem is what makes this level of Bill's intelligence mean something. Stanford Pines, before the events of the show, is a physicist. The show gives us enough to understand that his academic work was serious and that his theories were legitimate attempts to answer questions at the outer edge of what the discipline understood. He had an anomaly, a sixth finger on one hand, that had marked him as strange and driven a wedge between him and the ordinary world for his entire life, and between him and his twin brother Stan in a moment during their youth that left a scar that neither of them fully recovered from for 30 years. He had built a career on the back of an exceptional mind and a willingness to pursue questions other physicists were not taking seriously. In the years before the show begins, before Dipper and Mabel ever set foot in Gravity Falls, Ford was working on something at the edge of what he believed was theoretically possible: the physics of interdimensional connection, the mathematics of a portal between realities. Bill found him in that work and presented himself as a collaborator, a muse, a being who shared Ford's interest in these questions and found his specific mind worth engaging with seriously. We established all of that in the psychological level. What the fourth level adds is the technical dimension of that collaboration, and it matters because Bill was not just flattering Ford or providing emotional support for work Ford would have arrived at on his own. He was doing technical work. He was providing solutions to specific mathematical problems that had stopped Ford's research cold. He was offering the equations that opened the next step. This is the part that gets me, the part I think does not get enough attention. For Bill to provide Ford Pines, a genuine and serious physicist, with correct and workable mathematical solutions to problems at the cutting edge of theoretical physics, Bill has to actually know those solutions. Not approximately, not impressionistically, exactly. The portal that Ford eventually builds actually works. The nightmare dimension connection it creates is real and functional, and it is what ultimately, after Ford destroys the portal and Stan slowly rebuilds it from the journals over 30 years, produces the interdimensional rift that Bill needs. The math is right, and a significant portion of that math came from Bill. Think about what that means for a moment. Over 1 trillion years in the nightmare dimension, and before that a lifetime in a two-dimensional universe where the third dimension was his to perceive, but not to fully inhabit, Bill has accumulated a technical understanding of dimensional physics that is genuinely far in advance of the most exceptional human physicist of the 20th century. Not the understanding of a casual observer of dimensional phenomena, but the working technical knowledge of an entity who has navigated multiple dimensions and the spaces between them, who has direct personal experience of how the nightmare dimension is structured and what kind of engineering could bridge it to physical reality, and who has watched dozens of civilizations attempt the same basic problem from the outside while quietly identifying where their approaches failed. He is not just a psychologist and a strategist. He is an applied physicist of the highest order, and the portal that appears in the Mystery Shack basement is the product of that physics. That detail matters because it means Bill's investment in Ford is not purely manipulative in the cynical sense of the word. It is a genuine technical collaboration in which Bill contributes real knowledge. The deception is not that the physics is fake. The deception is about what the physics is for. The collaboration proceeds over what appears to be a significant stretch of time. Ford builds the portal. He documents his work in the journals. He makes progress. And then, during a test run of the partially completed device, his research partner Fiddleford McGucket enters the portal briefly and emerges from it deeply traumatized, shaken at some fundamental level. Something about what exists on the other side of the portal, in the space the portal connects to, has done something lasting to his mind. He is never quite the same. Ford shuts the project down immediately. He investigates. He looks at what he has built and what it connects to with fresh eyes, without the excitement of the ongoing work blinding him to what he is actually looking at. And he realizes that the space on the other side of the portal is not the neutral interdimensional zone he had imagined. It is the nightmare dimension. What Bill has guided him toward building is not a scientific achievement in the sense of opening a new vista of knowledge. It is a weapon, or more precisely, it is a door. And the thing waiting on the other side of that door is Bill. And what Bill wants is not to visit and have a conversation. It is to bring the lawless chaos of his home into contact with physical reality in a way that would reshape physical reality in the nightmare dimension's image. Ford destroys Journal 1, the first of his 3 research journals. He breaks contact with Bill, and whatever happens next, in the confrontation or escalation that follows, results in Ford going through the active portal himself and being transported to other dimensions, where he spends the next 30 years. Gone, unreachable, his journals scattered, his research interrupted at the final stage, his twin brother Stan left behind in Gravity Falls without understanding what happened, without any ability to reach Ford, without even being sure Ford is still alive. The story of Gravity Falls' first season is largely the story of Stan Pines rebuilding the portal in secret, driven by the need to bring his brother back, not understanding what the portal is or what it connects to, not knowing what Bill is or what role Bill played in Ford's disappearance. He works from the journals, piece by piece, for 30 years. The story of the second season is what happens when the portal finally opens again, when Ford comes home, when the rift that forms as a byproduct of the portal's operation becomes the last key to everything Bill has been working toward. It is worth dwelling on what this moment of discovery means for Ford, because the show handles it with more care than most storytelling about betrayal ever manages. Ford does not simply find out he was deceived and feel angry. He finds out that the being he most felt understood by, the one intelligence in his life that had engaged with his work as the serious and extraordinary thing he believed it was, had been using that apparent understanding as a tool the entire time. The recognition was an instrument. The collaboration was a manipulation. The experience of finally feeling seen and appreciated by another mind capable of following what he was doing was a carefully constructed means to an end that has nothing to do with him. For a person who has spent his entire life feeling unlike everyone around him, unable to find the kind of recognition that feels real and matching, this particular form of betrayal is almost unbearably specific. Bill did not just trick Ford into building a dangerous machine. He knew exactly what Ford most needed, and he provided a version of it as bait. He used Ford's loneliness as the mechanism of the manipulation, and Ford, who is brilliant and careful and has thought deeply about almost everything he has ever encountered, did not see it coming, because the thing Bill gave him was something he had wanted for so long that the wanting overrode the suspicion. This is the part of the Ford story that I think Gravity Falls handles with the most maturity. Not the portal, not the journals, not the 30 years in other dimensions. The specific quality of being deceived by something that was pretending to understand you. The show does not ask you to think Ford was foolish for being taken in. It asks you to understand how precisely Bill calibrated the approach to Ford's particular shape of longing, and it asks you to understand that very intelligent people are as vulnerable to this kind of targeted manipulation as anyone else, sometimes more so, because they have thought hard about so many things and have found so few people who could follow them, and when one appears, they tend to trust it before they can verify whether they should. Ford spends the rest of the second season with a unicorn hair mind shield protecting his thoughts from Bill, having taken the extraordinary and expensive precaution of acquiring a material that prevents Bill from entering his mind directly. This is a man who is not naive. He understands exactly what Bill can do because he has felt it firsthand. The shield is the physical expression of a lesson learned at enormous cost, and the show gives Ford the dignity of having learned it without ever suggesting he was wrong to trust in the first place. What the fourth level establishes is the specific nature of the technical expertise Bill was required to bring to the collaboration with Ford. It was not general intelligence or general knowledge. It was precise, applied, dimensional physics, the kind of knowledge that only comes from direct experience of the structures involved. Bill knows how the nightmare dimension works because he lived in it for unimaginable stretches of time. He knows what a physical to nightmare bridge requires because he has been thinking about exactly that problem across dozens of failed civilization-scale experiments. He knows Ford's equations better than Ford does, not because he is simply smarter, though he is, but because he has been working on the underlying problem longer than any human civilization has existed. There is another detail in the fourth level that I find genuinely fascinating and that I almost never hear discussed. It concerns what Bill does not know. For all his technical expertise, for all his knowledge of dimensional physics and the nightmare dimension structure and the mathematical requirements of a functional portal, there is one thing Bill cannot do without Ford. He cannot build the portal himself. He is, before Weirdmageddon, confined to operating in the mindscape and through possessing willing or tricked hosts. He cannot work in the physical world directly. He cannot pick up tools. He cannot write equations on paper or connect wiring or calibrate instruments. He needs hands. Specifically, he needs the hands of a being who is in the physical world and who has the knowledge to use them correctly. Ford is not just the smartest person available. He is a necessary collaborator, the physical world component of a technical project that Bill cannot execute alone. The manipulation is sophisticated partly because it has to be. A cruder approach, a being who could simply take a host body and build the portal himself without ever needing to develop a relationship with the physicist, would not have needed the months or years of careful, sustained attention that Bill invests in Ford. He needed Ford specifically, and he needed Ford to want to build the portal, and those requirements together are what made the psychological level necessary in the first place. The fourth level is, when you read it carefully, a story about limitation as much as capability. Bill has the technical knowledge, Ford has the hands and the tools and the physical access. Neither alone can do what both together can. And the intelligence required to identify that gap, to identify the specific individual best positioned to fill it, to approach that individual in the way most likely to produce voluntary and enthusiastic collaboration, and to sustain that approach over the years required to get a portal from theoretical concept to physical reality, is the synthesis of every level we have discussed so far. The perception that sees what others miss, the psychological read that knows how to present itself, the historical patience that has been running this problem for thousands of years, and the technical expertise that can actually provide the solutions required to make the project advance. All four levels operating simultaneously, in service of a single machine in a basement in Oregon, whose construction took decades and whose completion changed everything. The fifth level is the one that is hardest to write about without overstating it, because the show both presents us with its full scope and is careful to draw specific limits around it in ways that matter enormously for how the story resolves. This level is clairvoyant intelligence, the ability to perceive, across the full range of possible futures and possible timelines, the most probable paths forward. Not omniscience exactly, not certainty, but something close enough to certainty, in most situations, that the distinction rarely matters until it suddenly, fatally does. What the show establishes across multiple episodes is that Bill has a relationship with time and possible futures that no other character in Gravity Falls possesses. He can identify, in any given situation, what the most likely outcomes are. He is aware of the landscape of what is probable, and that awareness informs every decision he makes. He tells people the exact time and date and cause of their own deaths, presented in the show as a casual party trick he performs because he finds it amusing. He references future events with the confidence of someone who has already verified them. He is watching threads of possibility the way someone else might watch a game they already know the final score of. The evidence for this in the show is scattered but consistent. In Dreamscapers, after being struck in the eye by Dipper's laser and driven momentarily back, Bill departs with cheerful certainty that big things are coming. This is not a threat in the conventional sense, not a villain's bluster about future revenge. It reads, when you listen closely, as a simple statement of what he already knows is in the schedule. When he appears in Ford's dreams in The Last Mabelcorn, the 15th episode of the second season aired September 7, 2015, he taunts Ford with the observation that Ford cannot keep the interdimensional rift safe forever. This is also not a threat. It is a prediction delivered with the casual certainty of someone stating a fact they verified before the conversation began. Fans and commentators sometimes call this ability ciphervoyance, a perceptual reach across timelines that gives Bill access to probable futures as well as pasts, to the full sweep of what was and what is likely to be. The specifics of how exactly this works are not spelled out in clinical detail in the show, and I want to be careful not to state as fact what is partly reading and extrapolation from what we see. But the behavioral evidence across his appearances is consistent with a being who is operating, at least some of the time, with information about how things are likely to go that his counterparts in any given scene simply do not have access to. The surveillance element of this level is the most concrete and the most elegantly encoded in the show's design. Bill claims to be able to see through any depiction of himself, any eye-like marking that resembles his form or his gaze. The show takes this seriously enough to encode it directly into the Mystery Shack's background. Hidden in the pipes of the building where the entire series takes place, readable once you know what cipher to apply, is a message. Bill is watching. Encoded using a Caesar cipher, 3 letters back, the text in the pipes spells out a shifted version of those words. Gravity Falls is a show famous for the ciphers hidden in its end credits and background details. A show that trained an entire generation of viewers to assume that everything means something, that every odd detail is a clue. And the pipes message is one of the most chilling payoffs of that training, because it tells you, from very early in the run, that the entity who is the eventual main villain has had eyes inside the central location of the show all along. This is the part of the 5th level I find most unsettling, and almost nobody discusses it in quite these terms. The Mystery Shack is not just where Dipper and Mabel lived during the summer, it is where the journals were kept. It is where Stan was secretly rebuilding the portal. It is the location of more significant events in the story than anywhere else in Gravity Falls. And Bill, according to the show's own coded background detail, was watching all of it. The progress on the portal, the discovery of Journal 3, every conversation Dipper had about the mysteries, every step Ford took toward securing the rift. Bill was watching. Maybe not in real time in every moment, maybe not with the granular attention of an active surveillance operation, but he was present in the background of the story's most important location, in the pipes and the walls, in a way that the show itself acknowledges through the cipher. Combined with his ability to enter minds through dreams, which requires consent, but which he obtains through manipulation with relative ease, this creates a surveillance picture that is nearly comprehensive. He can see the location. He can enter the dreams of the key players when he chooses. He can observe the emotional and psychological state of everyone in his field of interest and update his models in real time as circumstances change. The 5th level, the clairvoyant and perceptual level, is not a single ability, but a system of interlocking capabilities that collectively give him something close to omniscience about the situation around him. Then there is the limitation, and it is a real one, and the show is deliberate about it. Bill is not actually omniscient. He has been surprised, he has been deceived, he has been wrong. And the way he has been wrong is telling, because it reveals the specific shape of what his perception cannot do. In sock opera, for all the precision of his psychological read on Dipper, he does not fully account for Mabel's capacity to physically overpower a body he is inhabiting. He knows Mabel loves Dipper. He knows she would sacrifice things for him. But he does not model, correctly, what that love looks like in the specific form of a 12-year-old girl who has just discovered that her brother's body is being used to hurt people and who is willing to inflict real physical discomfort on something she loves to save it. The gap in his model is not a gap in information. It is a gap in imaginative reach. He does not know, from the inside, what that kind of loving aggression feels like. He cannot model it from first principles because he does not feel it. In the finale of the series, this limitation is the thing that ends Weirdmageddon. Bill's plan is to enter Ford's mind and extract the equation that would spread the reality distortion field beyond the boundaries of Gravity Falls. It is a sound plan. It is well targeted. Ford is the right person to go after, and the pyramid is the right place to hold him, and Mindscape entry is the right vector of approach. What Bill does not account for is that Dipper and Mabel will switch Stan and Ford's outfits, that Stan will offer himself as a decoy, and that Bill's certainty about which of the twins he is dealing with will not be sufficient to detect a last-minute jacket swap. He enters Stan's mind believing it to be Ford's. Ford erases Stan's memories with McGucket's memory gun while Bill is inside, and Bill, trapped in the mind of a man whose memories are being deleted, is erased along with them. The trick that ends him is, by the standards of the 5 levels of intelligence we have discussed up to this point, almost insultingly simple. 2 people switch their jackets. That is it. That is the mechanism. The being who has been planning across thousands of years of human history and who can see probable futures and who knows the exact time and cause of anyone's death was defeated by 2 people switching their jackets at the last second, and by one of them being willing to sit in a chair and lose his memories to make it work. I think the show is entirely deliberate about this. The simplicity of the trick is the point. The 5th level of Bill's intelligence, for all its extraordinary reach, has a hard ceiling. It cannot model what it cannot feel. It cannot predict decisions that are made from love rather than calculation. It cannot account for the specific kind of courage that does not calculate odds at all, that does not weigh the cost against the likely outcome, that simply acts because someone loves someone else and there is no time to do anything else. His models of human behavior are calibrated to the human behavior that is most legible to a being who has been watching humans for thousands of years. The desire for recognition, the hunger for power, the anxiety about loss, the desperation for knowledge. Those are the patterns he has seen enough times to model with precision. What he has not seen, or has not absorbed into his models, is the decision that comes from so far inside a relationship that it does not look like a decision at all. The fifth level is vast. It is impressive. It is one of the things that makes Bill a genuinely formidable antagonist, rather than just a powerful one. But it is not unlimited, and the limitation is not a random weakness thrown in to make the plot work. It is the natural ceiling of an intelligence that is, for all its extraordinary reach, built on the assumption that other beings are ultimately predictable if you have enough data about them. That assumption is almost always right. It is wrong exactly once, in exactly the right moment, and that is enough. The sixth level is the one you see in the final 3 episodes of Gravity Falls, and it is also the most straightforwardly spectacular, the level that is hardest to misread because it is simply right there in front of you. Not a pattern of behavior you have to read across episodes, not a manipulation you have to reconstruct from the pieces, not a planning horizon so vast it takes effort to see the whole shape of it. Just Bill, in full physical form, doing things that rewrite the rules of what is possible in the show's world, and doing them with the ease of someone for whom these things are not effort at all. The rift is broken at the end of Dipper and Mabel versus the Future. The 17th episode of the 2nd season aired October 12, 2015. For the whole of the first 2 seasons, the interdimensional rift, the remnant fragment of the portal that formed when Ford's machine was destroyed and the dimensional barrier cracked, has been one of the most carefully guarded objects in the show. Ford built a case for it. He built mind shields to protect his own mind and prevent Bill from learning where it was. He talked about it in terms that made very clear the catastrophic nature of what would happen if it was broken. The rift, cracked open, would release the nightmare dimension into physical reality. Bill, with the rift broken, would be free to cross into the physical world in his full form. Then Mabel, manipulated by a disguised Bill, hands it over, and Bill shatters it immediately. The first episode of the Weirdmageddon arc, titled with a cryptogram that decodes to a phrase about Bill's arrival, aired October 26, 2015. The sequence of events at the start of that episode is the single clearest demonstration we have of what the 6th level looks like when it is finally operating without constraint. Bill's astral form, the cartoon triangle in the top hat that the show has been presenting for 2 seasons as something between a nightmare and a punchline, grows muscles, takes on mass, becomes something physical and large and present in the material world for the first time. The pyramid rises from the suffering of Gravity Falls' residents, a pyramid built from the petrified bodies of people turned to stone and arranged into Bill's monument to himself, his base of operations for the apocalypse he has been planning since before human civilization began. Then the Time Baby arrives. The Time Baby is presented in the show's lore as one of the most powerful entities in existence, a cosmic authority who commands a time police and exercises temporal jurisdiction across multiple dimensions. The arrival of the Time Baby to confront Bill is presented as the kind of backup you call in when things are genuinely beyond what ordinary responses can handle. He shows up in force. He announces himself as a supreme authority. He orders Bill to stop what he is doing. Bill vaporizes him. The Time Baby and his entire force gone in the space of a few seconds. The cryptogram in the end credits of that episode confirms that it will take 1,000 years for the Time Baby's molecules to reconstitute. 1,000 years for the molecules to put themselves back together. I want to sit with that for a moment because I think it is one of the most striking statements of scale in the entire series, and it is easy to let it pass by. The Time Baby exists outside ordinary time in some sense. He commands temporal forces. His power is real and significant enough that his arrival is treated as meaningful by every character who has any knowledge of what he represents. And Bill, in his full physical form, reduces him to a dispersal of particles that will spend the next millennium reassembling. That is not a demonstration of strength in the narrative sense of a powerful villain showing their teeth. That is a physics statement about the order of magnitude of the force involved. What follows is Gravity Falls transformed. The show had always had a particular quality of strangeness to it, the kind of controlled absurdity that comes from a mystery box story that takes its weirdness seriously rather than playing it purely for laughs. There is always the sense, throughout both seasons, that the weird things happening in and around Gravity Falls are real and specific, that they follow their own internal logic, that the rules of the show's universe are consistent even when those rules are strange. Weirdmageddon takes that strangeness and removes all the control. The rules stop applying. Inanimate objects come to life and pursue agendas of their own. Organic matter transforms unpredictably. Citizens are turned to stone and arranged into the architecture of the pyramid. A reality distortion field spreads outward from Gravity Falls in all directions, slowly reshaping everything it touches in Bill's image. A world where the laws of physics are whatever Bill says they are in a given moment, where cause and effect are suggestions rather than rules, where the only stable organizing principle is Bill's own will. Bill presides over all of it with an energy that the show presents as genuine rather than performative. This is not the chaotic, gleeful act he puts on in his normal mindscape appearances. This is what he actually is when the constraints are removed. The sixth level, the reality-warping physical intelligence, is not a new thing Bill is doing. It is the thing Bill has always been, expressed without limits for the first time. The nightmare dimension that produced him, the formless, lawless crawlspace between worlds where he spent unimaginable stretches of time after the destruction of Euclydia, is the default state of his experience. The ordered physical world, with its gravity and its causality and its predictable physics and its mortal beings who live and die and love each other on timescales Bill cannot quite be bothered to keep track of, is the strange thing. Weirdmageddon is Bill making physical reality look more like what he is used to. The henchmaniacs he summons to join him are worth a moment of attention, because they are a window into what Bill's social world actually looks like outside of the context of manipulating humans. 8-Ball, the lanky green demon with magic 8-ball eyes. Teeth, a being composed entirely of a set of teeth with arms and legs. Kryptos, diamond-shaped and one-eyed, physically similar to Bill himself. Pyronica, a cyclops-like figure made of fire. Pacifier, floating and pacifier-based in an unsettling way that the show clearly finds funnier than it has any right to. Amorphous shape. Hectorgon, Keyhole, Xanthar. These are Bill's associates from the nightmare dimension, beings who operate at a similar register to him, who share his fundamental indifference to the stability and comfort of the physical world and its inhabitants, who join him in the pyramid as the lieutenants of his new world order. They are also immediately defeated and sent back the moment Bill is erased, which says something about the nature of the power they exercise. It is borrowed power. It exists because Bill's physical presence in the world is making it possible. When Bill goes, the reality distortion field collapses, the petrified citizens reconstitute, the henchmaniacs are expelled. The sixth level of his intelligence, the reality-warping physical presence, is the one that is most dependent on the conditions being exactly right. He needed the rift to break. He needed to achieve physical form. Without those things, he is operating through deals and dreams and borrowed bodies, which is effective enough to run plans across human civilizations but is not the same as being physically present in the world as a force that rewrites the rules of it. There is one thing that does limit him even in this phase, and it is worth noting carefully because it is a real and specific constraint rather than a plot convenience. Unicorn hair. Ford had, in the period before Weirdmageddon, managed to acquire unicorn hair and used it to construct a mind shield that protects his thoughts from Bill's access. This protection is genuine. Bill cannot enter Ford's mind directly while the shield is active, and Ford's mind is precisely where the equation is kept. The equation that would allow Bill to spread the Weirdmageddon reality distortion beyond the anomalous field naturally surrounding Gravity Falls, and extend it across the entire planet. Without that equation, the apocalypse is geographically contained. Extraordinary inside its borders, effectively a god's domain within the reality bubble of this one Oregon town, but bounded, limited, a local catastrophe rather than a global one. This matters enormously. Bill in his full physical form is nigh omnipotent within the boundaries of the distortion field. He can reshape matter, manipulate time, peel back the rules of reality like a label on a jar, but he cannot reach through a specific hair from a specific kind of creature to access the one piece of information he needs to go global. This is the structural constraint that the heroes are able to exploit, though not easily, and not without tremendous cost. The fact that Bill has to capture and hold Ford physically, that he has to work on breaking down the shield rather than simply taking what he needs, gives the protagonists a window they would not otherwise have. This is also the episode where the Bill Cipher zodiac, the circle of 10 symbols that has been scattered through the show's backgrounds and credits for 2 seasons, becomes plot relevant rather than just a hidden code. The zodiac, when all 10 corresponding characters stand within it and hold hands, has the power to defeat Bill. It is a ritual that was seeded into the show's visual language long before the characters themselves discovered it. A detail so embedded in the background of the show that fans had theorized about it for years before the second season confirmed its significance. 10 symbols. The pine tree for Dipper, the shooting star for Mabel, the fez for Stan, the question mark for Seuss, the 6-fingered hand for Ford, the llama for Pacifica Northwest, the pentagram for Gideon, the heart, the ice bag for McGucket, the glasses for Wendy. All 10 characters together in the drawn circle, holding hands, invoking whatever cosmic principle the zodiac represents. Something interesting about the zodiac's origin is worth mentioning. Alex Hirsch has said in interviews that the symbols started as random background details, Gravity Falls' instinct to hide things in plain sight without a specific payoff in mind, and that as the fandom became obsessed with the wheel, he decided to write it into the story. The fandom's obsessive attention to the show's coded background details essentially forced the wheel into the plot. Viewers who had been training themselves for years on the show's ciphers and hidden messages were so deeply invested in the zodiac that the story bent toward it. That is a strange and lovely relationship between a show and its audience, and it is relevant to the 6th level because the zodiac is ultimately what makes the finale's defeat of Bill possible, even if the defeat does not come from the zodiac completing as intended. In the finale, Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, the hour-long grand finale of the show rather than the standard length, the zodiac ritual is attempted. All 10 characters assemble. They stand in the circle, they reach for each other's hands, and Stan and Ford argue, breaking the circle before it can complete. Because 30 years of separation and unresolved pain between the twins is not a thing that resolves cleanly in a crisis. The ritual fails, the circle breaks, and Bill moves to Plan B. Enter Ford's mind, get the equation, spread Weirdmageddon to the rest of the world. What he does not account for is what happens next. The jacket switch. Stan sits down in the chair. The memories go. And with them, Bill. The 6th level, the reality-warping physical intelligence, is the culmination of every other level. The perception, the psychological profiling, the historical strategy, the technical collaboration, the clairvoyant reach, all of it was aimed at this. Being in the physical world in full form, free to reshape it in the image of the only place he ever felt at home. It is everything he has been working toward for over 1 trillion years, and it lasts, across 3 episodes of the most carefully constructed animated finale of its era, for approximately 3 days before it is ended by a man in an ugly fez, sitting in a chair and telling Ford to pull the trigger. The 7th level is the one that Bill himself does not fully understand, or if he understands it, he has not yet found a way to act on it effectively, and that gap between understanding and implementation is where the most interesting and the strangest material in all of the Gravity Falls lore lives. This level is meta-intelligence. Cosmic awareness. It is the level at which Bill stops being a schemer operating within the universe and becomes something closer to a being who is aware of the structure of the universe itself, of the entities above him in whatever hierarchy governs the multiverse, of the game above the game he has been playing. The signal that this level exists comes from the series finale, from the moment of Bill's apparent death, and it comes in a form that the show requires effort to access. As Ford erases Stan's memories with McGucket's memory gun, while Bill is inside Stan's mind, Bill begins to come apart. His physical form freezes, shatters, and as he does, he speaks, backwards, at a speed and in a register that requires the clip to be reversed before the words are intelligible. And what he says, when you reverse it and slow it down, is this: A-X-O-L-O-T-L. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. He is invoking something. At the moment of his erasure, with what should be the last instant of his consciousness, Bill Cipher is not screaming. He is not panicking. He is not dissolving in chaos or begging or expressing shock at what is happening to him. He is performing a ritual invocation. He is addressing a specific entity by name. He is making a formal claim and a formal request that his time has come to burn. that he is invoking the ancient power that he may return. This is not the behavior of a being who has been caught unprepared and is reacting in desperate confusion. This is the behavior of a being who knew this moment was possible, who had identified in advance what to call on if it came, and who was, even in the instant of apparent destruction, still operating according to a plan, a longer plan, a plan that accounts for the possibility of the plan's own failure. The axolotl is the entity he names, and the axolotl is something the show introduces quietly, at the edges of the mythology, and which the lore has expanded in ways that reward close attention. Ford, in the finale, while searching for information about how to stop Bill, receives a message that arrives in the form of a verse. Encoded backwards in a whisper that the show's format requires you to reverse and listen carefully to, it describes the axolotl as a cosmic entity whose power ranks above the Time Baby, above Bill, above other significant extra-dimensional beings. In the wider lore, it is described as something worshipped throughout the multiverse as a force connected to good, and as the creator of the Theraprism, a space outside of time used to rehabilitate malevolent entities. The name references the Aztec figure Xolotl, connected in that mythology to lightning, death, and fire. Whether that connection is meaningful to the show's internal lore or simply a point of origin for the naming is left open. The verse Ford receives runs as follows: 60 degrees that come in threes, watches from within birch trees, saw his own dimension burn, misses home and can't return, says he's happy, he's a liar. Blame the arson for the fire. If he wants to shirk the blame, he'll have to invoke my name. One way to absolve his crime. A different form, a different time. I want to go through this line by line because it is one of the richest pieces of writing in the whole series, and it is easy to move past it without catching everything it is doing. 60 degrees that come in threes, a triangle. An equilateral triangle's interior angles are each 60 degrees, and there are 3 of them. The verse is describing Bill geometrically before naming him. Watches from within birch trees. Bill watching, hidden in plain sight, in the background of things. Saw his own dimension burn, Euclydia. The explicit confirmation, from a cosmic entity with no stake in Bill's self-presentation, that the Euclidean Massacre happened, and that Bill witnessed it. Misses home and can't return. This is the one I keep coming back to. Misses home. The cosmic entity, the axolotl, states plainly that Bill misses Euclydia. Not that he destroyed it and moved on. Not that he decided the nightmare dimension was better. That he misses the place he came from and cannot go back. This one line does something to the character that his own voice, in his own narration in the Book of Bill, or his cheerful performative speeches in the show, never quite does. It places something private at the center of him, something that was there before the nightmare dimension, before the plans, before the trillion years of scheming and deal-making, a child from a flat world who made a mistake, or made a choice, or did something in between, and lost his home, and cannot find his way back to it. The axolotl knows this and states it without apparent sympathy or condemnation, just as fact. It is the most human thing anyone says about Bill in the entire show, and it is said by an entity that is not human at all. Says he's happy. He's a liar. This is the axolotl directly calling out Bill's performance. The glee, the energy, the chaotic enthusiasm that Bill projects in every appearance is, according to a cosmic entity who has no reason to say so falsely, not the whole truth. It is a cover, blame the arson for the fire, a statement about culpability that does not quite resolve the ambiguity of the Euclidean Massacre, but leans toward accountability rather than away from it. The arson caused the fire. Bill caused the massacre. Whether it was intentional or accidental or something in between, he is the one who should bear the responsibility for it. If he wants to shirk the blame, he'll have to invoke my name. This is the operational part. The axolotl is stating a condition. Bill can invoke the axolotl's name. There is something that happens when he does. One way to absolve his crime. Singular, not multiple options. 1. A different form, a different time. Bill can return. Not in the form you know, not necessarily now. But the door is not closed, and the mechanism exists, and it is connected to the act of invoking the axolotl's name in the moment of crisis. So when Bill, at the moment of his erasure in the finale, says exactly those words, he is not improvising. He is not reaching in desperation for something he half remembers. He is performing a precise invocation of a specific cosmic mechanism he has identified and studied, at the exact moment when that invocation can be made. The seventh level of his intelligence is that he knows this mechanism exists. He knows the name to say, and he says it. Whether it worked is something the show does not answer. But the attempt is the thing. The fact that he made it tells you everything. And the fact that it is hidden backwards in the audio, requiring you to reverse the clip and listen carefully before the words become intelligible, tells you something about the show's approach to all of this. The most important thing Bill says in the entire series, the thing that reframes everything that came before it and opens the question of what happens next, is not available on a first pass through the material. It is there, in the audio, in every copy of the episode, in every streaming version, waiting for whoever takes the time to reverse it and listen. The show trusts that someone will. It has been training them to do exactly that since the first episode's credit cryptogram. The Book of Bill, published in July of 2024, is the most recent expansion of the lore and the clearest statement we have of what happened after the finale. Bill is not dead, or not dead in any sense the word usually conveys. He is in the Theraprism, a neutral zone outside time and space, a space created by the axolotl and used for the rehabilitation of malevolent entities. The axolotl, rather than destroying Bill permanently or leaving him to be erased along with Stan's memories, sentenced him to a cosmic therapeutic program. The hope, on the axolotl's part, was rehabilitation, the restoration over time of some quality in Bill that had been lost or damaged or buried under a trillion years of nihilism and scheme running. Bill, being Bill, had no intention of reforming. He does not experience the Theraprism as an opportunity. He experiences it as a prison, which in the most literal sense it is. He is outside time, outside the nightmare dimension, outside any access to the physical world or the dream space or any of the tools and channels he has used across his entire existence. He is cut off, contained, and his response to that containment is the seventh level's purest expression. He writes a book. The Book of Bill is framed within its own text as Bill's therapeutic journal, his required participation in the Theraprism's rehabilitation program. He is supposed to be working through his history, examining his choices, developing something like accountability for the Euclidean Massacre and for the harm he has caused across thousands of years of scheming. And the book does contain his history, his origin story, his accounts of his historical manipulations, lost pages from Journal 3, new cryptography systems he has designed within the Theraprism that the book's own reader has to decode. It contains real puzzles, real coded messages, real layers of hidden content that the book's audience has spent the months since its publication working through. But the book is also, explicitly and by design, a recruitment tool. Bill is using the book to find a reader in the physical world who will make a deal with him and free him from the Theraprism, the therapeutic journal, the autobiographical confession, the historical narrative. All of it is also a pitch, an extremely long and carefully constructed pitch to whoever picks it up, giving them things of value, a portion of his genuine history, real cipher systems to crack, real puzzle solutions, real insight into his mind, so that the transaction feels like something more than just a request. He is seducing the reader the same way he seduced Ford, by offering genuine understanding and genuine value alongside the ask that is actually the whole point. Here is the thing that makes the seventh level so precise in its expression. The Book of Bill became a #1 New York Times bestseller in August of 2024 in the advice, how-to, and miscellaneous category. As of mid-2025, it had sold over 850,000 copies worldwide and had remained on bestseller lists for more than 30 consecutive weeks. 8 years after the show ended, 8 years after the character was apparently erased from existence in a series finale, the book is Bill's pitch to over 850,000 people, his recruitment document, physically present in over 850,000 households, being read, in many cases, by the exact kind of person most likely to find him interesting. Someone who loved the show, who spent years decoding its ciphers, who knows what the axolotl poem says, and who understands that Bill's backwards dying words were a formal invocation of a cosmic mechanism. None of them have broken him out yet, as far as anyone knows, but that is also exactly what he would want you to believe, and exactly what he would say if they had, and he did not want anyone to know it happened. The seventh level is the one where Bill's intelligence becomes genuinely hard to separate from the real world, and that is either a compliment to the quality of the show's design or evidence that Bill's recruitment pitch is working, depending on your perspective. The ciphers in the show trained a generation of solvers. The ARG, the Cipher Hunt of 2016, deployed those trained solvers across an international scavenger hunt. The Book of Bill is the next phase of the same operation, using a real New York Times bestseller as the delivery vehicle for a cosmic jailbreak attempt by a fictional interdimensional demon who may or may not still be imprisoned, depending on who has been reading his book with the right kind of attention. There is also a deeper layer to the 7th level, the one that connects back to the very first level we talked about, the perceptual mutation that started everything. The axolotl poem's line about Bill missing home is, I think, the show's argument about what the 7th level ultimately is. For all the cosmic awareness, for all the meta-intelligence about the structure of the multiverse and the existence of entities like the axolotl and the mechanics of the theraprism, for all the planning that accounts for his own possible defeat and prepares an invocation for the moment of erasure, what is driving the 7th level is the same thing that was driving Bill in Euclydia before he had any of the other levels. He wants to go home. He cannot go home. Euclydia is gone. The nightmare dimension, the closest thing he has had to a home since Euclydia was destroyed, is outside the theraprism's walls. And the one entity with the power to do something about this is the axolotl, whose name he calls in his last moment, in a verse that says plainly, one way to absolve his crime, a different form, a different time. The 7th level is not just intelligence. It is the intelligence of a being who has been grieving for longer than the Earth has existed, who can see the possibility of his own return coded into the structure of the cosmos, and who is, even from inside a prison outside time, still pointing himself toward it. Before we close on all 7 levels, there are a few things I want to come back to, because this video is specifically about Bill's intelligence, and there are dimensions of it that do not fit neatly inside any of the 7 levels, but that are absolutely essential to understanding the full picture. The first of these is the flaw, because the 7 levels are not the whole story. Each of them contains, running alongside the capability, a specific failure mode, and the same quality that produces each level of intelligence is the thing that limits it. The flaw is ego. Not ego in the casual sense of confidence or self-regard, ego in a very specific structural sense. A fundamental inability to take seriously the idea that beings he considers lesser than himself might, in a given moment, exceed his models of them. Bill is, by any reasonable measure, the most intelligent entity in the Gravity Falls universe. He has over 1 trillion years of experience. He has perceptual capabilities no other character possesses. He has a psychological model of every person he interacts with that is accurate enough to produce correct predictions the vast majority of the time. And all of that is real. None of it is performance or bluff. The intelligence is genuine. But here is what genuine intelligence that never encounters a serious challenge tends to produce: the assumption that the challenge does not exist. If you have been right about other beings' behavior for 1 trillion years, across dozens of civilizations, across every significant interaction you can remember, you develop something that feels like certainty and functions like certainty almost all of the time. Then you arrive at the one situation where certainty is wrong, and you do not recognize it as the exception because you have no recent memory of exceptions. Bill underestimates Stan, the most consequential single underestimation in the show, and the one that costs him everything, is his underestimation of Stan Pines. Stan is, from Bill's operational perspective, a minor figure. He is not a genius like Ford. He is not an important variable in the Portal project. He is the man who rebuilt the portal from instructions he did not understand because he was too stubborn to accept that his brother might be gone. He is a con man, a carnival operator, a person whose primary skill is deceiving people who are already suspicious and who know they might be being deceived. He is not, by any metric Bill uses to assess threats, a significant one. And this is where the ego becomes the flaw. Bill's models of people are built on what he has observed across the full span of his existence. What he has observed, across all those civilizations and all those iterations, is that beings tend to act in their own survival interest when the situation becomes critical. Even beings who love each other tend to calculate, to weigh the cost, to hedge. The self-preservation instinct is one of the most universal and most reliable variables in his model of conscious behavior. He has built his entire psychological profiling system around reading that instinct and working with it or against it. What Stan does is not accessible to a model built on that instinct. He does not calculate, he does not weigh, he does not hedge or ask what the odds are of the memory eraser restoring him. He just looks at his brother and makes a choice that has no survival logic to it at all. Because the choice is not about survival. It is about the same thing that has been driving Stan for 30 years. The fact that his brother is in danger, and he cannot stand to watch it happen when there is something, anything, he can do. Bill's ego is the assumption that this kind of decision is not in the model because it is not in the observable data. He has watched human beings make decisions for thousands of years, and what the data shows over and over is that self-preservation wins. Love complicates the calculation, but does not override it in the final accounting. That is what the data shows, and what Stan demonstrates, in the most literal and physically irreversible way available to him, is that the data is sometimes wrong. Not because the data is bad data, because the person making the decision is not running the calculation. This is the thing about Bill's 7 levels of intelligence that I find myself thinking about long after the show is over. Each level is genuine, each one is extraordinary, but each one is also the expression of a being whose fundamental operating assumption is that intelligence is the most important thing, that seeing more than others see is the quality that matters most, that the person who understands the situation best is the one who will control its outcome. The show disagrees with that, not loudly, not in a speech, but in the specific mechanism of how Bill is defeated and what it takes to defeat him. It takes someone who does not care about controlling the outcome, who is not trying to win in any strategic sense, who simply acts from inside a love that is older and more specific and more ordinary than anything in Bill's trillion-year catalog of human behavior. 7 levels of intelligence. And it ends there, in a chair, with a man who was never particularly smart but who loved his brother enough to not need to be. I think that is the joke the show has been telling us the entire time, and I only really heard it on the 3rd or 4th watch. Every layer of Bill's mind is built to solve the problem of being seen accurately. He was born unseen in Euclydia. He wanted to be seen, and the levels are, in a strange way, ways of forcing the world to reckon with him. Perception first, then reading others, then history, then physics, then time, then reality itself, then the multiverse. Being seen at every scale. And what defeats him is a person who is not trying to see or be seen at all. Just a brother, choosing his brother, because that is the only choice available inside the love he actually has. Bill has been trying to matter on a cosmic scale for 1 trillion years. Stan just wants Ford back. There is one more piece to this picture that belongs alongside the 7 levels rather than inside any of them. And it is the piece that has done the most to keep Bill alive in the culture even after the finale. That is the way his intelligence expresses itself outside the show, in the real world, through the ciphers. Gravity Falls is a show that is famous for hiding things. Not in a vague sense, not in the way that a lot of storytelling involves subtext or implication, or things that require a second viewing to catch. Gravity Falls hides things in a very specific, technical, literal sense. It hides encoded messages in the end credits of every episode, using different cipher systems that the show itself teaches you to use if you are paying close attention. The whisper at the start of the theme, played backwards, tells you which cipher the episode's cryptogram uses. Caesar cipher for the first 6 episodes, 3 letters back. @ cipher for the next several, switch A with Z, A1Z26 for the subsequent block, 26 letters mapped to numbers. The Season 1 finale uses a combined cipher. Season 2 moves to Visionaire, a more complex system that requires a keyword to decode. This is a significant thing to have built into a Disney Channel animated series aimed primarily at children and families, not because hiding things in media is unusual, plenty of shows do it, but because the system Gravity Falls uses is genuinely sophisticated and genuinely requires the viewer to learn real cryptographic skills to engage with it fully. The show did not hide Easter eggs that were fun to notice but empty of content. It hid messages that had actual content, actual revelations, sometimes foreshadowing events that would not come clear until seasons later, sometimes confirming theories fans had been developing, sometimes just being an extra layer of voice from the show itself, speaking directly to the viewers who had done the work of decoding. The pipes message, which we talked about in the clairvoyance section, is one of the most striking examples because it is spatial rather than temporal. It is not in the credits of a particular episode. It is in the background of the show's central location, readable if you know the cipher and you know to look at the pipes. Bill is watching, encoded into the architecture of the Mystery Shack, an environment detail that you only understand if you have already been trained by the show's credit ciphers to look for encoded messages in unexpected places. The show teaches you to read it and then shows you something that makes you wish, at least briefly, that you had not. The Rumble's Revenge Flash game, released during the first season as supplemental content, contained hidden messages from the Triangle Guy, as Bill was then known, that decoded to "My name is Bill" before he had appeared on screen in the show itself. Fans solved this in real time. They were decoding messages from a character who had not yet introduced himself, using cipher skills the show's credit system had been training them in, and in doing so they learned the villain's name before the main narrative revealed it. The line between the show's story and the audience's experience of decoding that story was deliberately blurred from the beginning. The thing that makes the cipher system especially interesting to me, when I think about it in relation to Bill specifically, is what it tells us about the show's design at the level of authorial intent. Alex Hirsch was not hiding messages in the credits as a fun bonus for attentive viewers while keeping the actual story in the animation. He was building two parallel story channels, one visual and one encoded, that comment on each other and that together tell a more complete version of what is happening than either tells alone. The decoded credit messages from the first season often add texture or irony to what the episode itself portrayed. They shift the framing. They suggest that someone, something, is speaking alongside the story rather than just inside it. In the second season, the cipher shifts to Vigenere, which requires a keyword to decrypt rather than a simple reversal or substitution. The keywords are hidden elsewhere in the show. Finding them requires a broader search, a more active engagement with the full body of material the show has produced. The escalation of difficulty mirrors the escalation of the narrative itself. As the stakes of the story rise and Bill's plan moves closer to completion, the cipher system requires more of the decoder. The two channels stay in sync. The backwards audio technique is a companion to the cipher system rather than a replacement for it. Bill's death words, the axolotl poem that Ford receives, the whisper at the start of the theme that tells you which cipher to use. All of these require you to reverse the audio, to actively flip the direction of time in the recording to hear what is there. The gesture is not accidental. A show about a villain who can perceive timelines and probable futures, who plans across millennia, who is defeated partly by people acting unexpectedly in a single moment, puts some of its most important content in a direction you have to consciously reverse the flow of time to access. The form and the content are, throughout Gravity Falls, doing the same thing. Alex Hirsch built a show that treated its audience as cryptographers, not casually, not as a cute surface detail, but structurally. The cipher system in the credits is not a decoration. It is a parallel narrative channel, running alongside the animated story, available only to viewers who have done the work to access it. The result, over 2 seasons, was the creation of a viewer community with genuine cryptographic skills, with the habit of assuming that every detail might contain an encoded message, with the trained instinct to reverse audio and apply cipher keys and check backgrounds for hidden text. A generation of solvers, trained by a Disney Channel cartoon. The Cipher Hunt of 2016 is the clearest expression of what that training produced. Alex Hirsch organized an international scavenger hunt beginning on July 20th of that year, several months after the series ended, sending fans across multiple continents following clues that began in St. Petersburg, Russia. The clues deployed every skill the show had built into its audience: cipher decoding, backwards audio, image analysis, coordination across time zones. The kind of collective problem-solving that the internet makes possible, but that still requires thousands of people to bring genuine skill and sustained attention to a shared task. The hunt spanned Japan and Los Angeles and multiple other locations before resolving in a forest near Reedsport, Oregon, where a physical statue of Bill Cipher, built by movie prop master Fawn Davis from plexiglass and treated so moss would grow over it and give it an aged appearance, had been hidden and was waiting to be found. The statue was found on August 2, 2016, at 53 minutes past 7 in the evening, by a fan posting on Twitter under the handle Shadow Wolfwind. The hunt had taken approximately 13 days from start to finish. It had involved fans across multiple continents contributing to a single shared decoding problem, deploying skills they had built over the 4 years of watching and decoding Gravity Falls, and it had concluded with a physical object hidden in the real world by the show's creator, in a real forest in Oregon, found by a real person who had followed a chain of clues across multiple countries. The statue was later moved, and its exact current whereabouts I would rather not state as fixed fact, because these things move around. But the physical existence of a Bill Cipher statue, built and hidden by the show's creator as part of an international ARG, concluded by the fandom working together, is one of the stranger and more wonderful things I can think of to say about any piece of animated television. The statue is made of plexiglass with moss encouraged to grow into its surface to give it an aged and weathered look, so that if you found it in the forest without context, it might read as something much older than it is. An intentional deception, right down to the material. Very on brand. The real-world extension of Bill's intelligence, through the show's cipher system, through the ARG, through the supplemental books, is not incidental to the character. It is the seventh level finding its expression outside the show's borders. Bill in the show sees through any depiction of himself. Bill in the real world, as constructed by Hirsch, is present in flash games and credit cryptograms and physical statues in Oregon forests and best-selling books that are also recruitment pitches. The line between in-show and out-of-show blurs in exactly the same way that the show implies it should, if you take seriously the idea that Bill's influence extends beyond the nightmare dimension and the dreamscape and into whatever medium is available. Gravity Falls, Journal 3, the real-world adaptation of Ford's research journal, was published in July of 2016 and became a New York Times bestseller. It was written by Alex Hirsch and Rob Renzetti and takes the form of the physical journal from the show, complete with the notes and cryptic additions that Ford would have made, with pages dipper annotated, with Stan's marginalia. It is a book that exists in a strange space between the show's world and the readers, designed to be held and examined rather than simply read, and it extends the cipher and puzzle tradition of the show into a physical object you can carry around and decode at your leisure. Then, 8 years later, the Book of Bill arrives, and the tradition continues in a form that is considerably stranger and more adult in tone. The book is, as Alex Hirsch has discussed, the first Gravity Falls material explicitly written for the audience that watched the show as children and has now grown up. It contains content more intense and more explicit in its darkness than anything in the original series. It is framed as Bill's own therapeutic journal, written from inside the theraprism, and it contains his full origin story in more detail than the show provided. His accounts of his historical manipulations, lost pages from Journal 3, new cipher systems requiring new decoding skills, and, threaded through everything, the ongoing pitch. Read this, find a way to help me, make a deal. The book hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list in August of 2024 in the advice, how-to, and miscellaneous category. Over 850,000 copies worldwide as of mid-2025. More than 30 consecutive weeks on bestseller lists. 8 years after the show's finale. The audience that was trained by the credit ciphers, that solved the cipher hunt, that debated every frame of the Weirdmageddon arc and decoded every backwards whisper in the finale, came back for the book and brought new readers with them. The community that the show built is still active and still engaged and still, in the most literal possible sense, doing the decoding. Alex Hirsch signed an overall deal with Netflix in August of 2018, and in 2024, a Disney executive vice president of television animation, speaking publicly about the future of the franchise, confirmed that the company was in conversations with Hirsch about a potential Gravity Falls project. Nothing has been officially announced as of the time of this video. No confirmed Season 3, no confirmed film, no confirmed premiere date or format or scope. As of mid-2026, as far as I can honestly tell you, it remains conversations rather than anything concrete, and I would rather tell you that plainly than dress up a rumor in the language of confirmation. The show ended in February of 2016. What happens next is not yet known, except that the conversation is apparently ongoing and that both parties seem interested in continuing it. There is one more detail about Bill Cipher that I want to hold up before we get to the closing, because it is a detail that seems minor and turns out to be deeply strange when you think about it. Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, voices Bill himself. Not through a hired voice actor, not through a casting decision, but personally, in the recording studio, in every scene where Bill speaks. Hirsch has described his Bill voice as his version of a David Lynch impression, a kind of manic, honeyed, sinister register that he clearly enjoys performing. The creator is the villain, in the most literal possible sense. When Bill Cipher speaks to Dipper in the Mindscape, when he taunts Ford in his dreams, when he delivers the backwards words at the moment of his apparent death, It is Alex Hirsch's voice you are hearing. The man who designed the show, who built the cipher system into the credits, who organized the cipher hunt, who wrote the Book of Bill, is the one speaking as the entity those things are about. The design choice reinforces the strange quality of the boundary between the show and its creator. The ciphers in the credits are not there by accident, they are placed by Hirsch. The ARG is not an extension of the fictional universe. It is an extension of Hirsch's own creative engagement with the character and the audience. And the voice that speaks as Bill, that whispers backwards at the moment of the finale's crisis, is Hirsch himself. The entity that designed a recruitment document to be disguised as a therapeutic journal is the creation of the person who wrote and voiced and organized every layer of the show's engagement with its audience. There is something almost recursive about it, the way the show's relationship between author and character keeps folding back on itself. Bill tries to blur the line between his fiction and the reader's reality through the Book of Bill. Hirsch blurs the line between himself and his creation by voicing it. The show's intelligence and the character's intelligence are, in some sense, the same intelligence expressed through different channels. What Gravity Falls was, in the years it ran, is not hard to state factually. It premiered on June 15, 2012 on Disney Channel. It concluded on February 15, 2016 on Disney XD. 40 episodes across 2 seasons, 2 Emmy Awards, 3 Annie Awards, a BAFTA Children's Award. These are the numbers, and the numbers are good, and they are not the most interesting thing about the show. The most interesting thing about the show, and the thing I keep thinking about when I think about Bill Cipher in particular, is the argument it makes about intelligence. Not about what intelligence is, or how to develop it, but about what intelligence cannot do. The show is full of smart people. Ford is a genius. Dipper is 12 years old and consistently outthinks adults twice his age. McGucket builds functioning memory-erasing technology in a shack in the woods. The show treats intelligence with genuine respect, treats the act of figuring things out as meaningful and valuable and worth doing, trains its audience to be better at it by hiding coded messages in the credits and asking them to decode. Then, in the finale, it stages a very specific demonstration of what intelligence cannot do. It cannot replace love, not in the sense of a greeting card sentiment about feelings being more important than brains, but in a specific structural sense that the finale enacts. Bill's intelligence is the largest and most sophisticated and most temporally extended in the show by an almost incalculable margin, and it fails in the precise place where love produces a decision that is not a decision, where a man chooses to sacrifice his own mind not because he calculated the odds and found them acceptable, but because his brother is in danger and there is nothing else to do. No intelligence in the multiverse, even one calibrated across 1 trillion years of watching human beings make choices, can fully model what that looks like in the moment. It is outside the model. It is the thing that breaks the model. Stan Pines is not a genius. He is a con man with a heart he spent most of his life pretending not to have. He is a man who missed his brother for 30 years and spent those years rebuilding a machine he did not understand to bring him back, because the alternative was accepting that his brother was gone and he could not do that. He is a man who, at the moment it most mattered, sat down in a chair. And Bill Cipher, over 1 trillion years old, with a perceptual reach across timelines and possible futures, with a psychological model of every person in his vicinity refined to near perfection, with the technical knowledge to build portals between dimensions and the cosmic awareness to invoke an entity above him in the last seconds of his existence, did not see it coming. This is what I think Gravity Falls is really about, if you push on it. Not the mysteries, though the mysteries are wonderful. Not the ciphers, though the ciphers reward the attention you give them. Not even the twins, or Grunkle Stan, or the beautiful melancholy of a summer that is running out from the very first episode. It is about the limit of seeing clearly. It is about the question of what you miss when you are busy perceiving everything. Bill sees more than anyone. He has always seen more than anyone. From the very first mutation in Euclydia, the thing that set him apart was the ability to see a dimension nobody else could access. What he cannot see, in the end, is not a dimension at all. It is the decision made from inside a relationship, from inside a love so specific and so ordinary and so human that no cosmic perceptual reach can ever quite map it from the outside. That is the show's argument. Not stated in those terms, not with those words, enacted. In a room in the pyramid, in an hour-long finale, with 2 men who have not really forgiven each other yet for 30 years of separation, one of whom is about to choose to lose everything in order to give the other a chance. This is the part of Gravity Falls I find most affecting, even now, even having watched it more times than I want to admit. Not the Weirdmageddon horror imagery, which is great. Not the cipher hunts, which are genuinely among the most engaging things any animated series has ever done with its audience. The quiet fact that the show looked at the smartest, most ancient, most powerful thing in its world and defeated it with a man in an ugly hat who loved his brother, and did not treat that as ironic or as a twist or as an unexpected upset, treated it as inevitable, as the only ending that made sense, as the shape the story had been moving toward all along, from the very first episode where two children arrived in a strange town and got their hands on a journal that told them nothing they could encounter was truly impossible. The ciphers are still there, in the credits, waiting for anyone who wants to decode them. The backwards whispers are still in the audio, requiring the clip to be reversed and listened to carefully. The pipes in the Mystery Shack background still say what they say. The axolotl poem still ends where it ends, one way to absolve his crime. A different form, a different time. The Book of Bill is still in over 850,000 households, doing whatever it is doing with that many readers. The conversation between Disney and Alex Hirsch is, as of mid-2026, still ongoing without a public resolution. And somewhere in the show's world, Bill Cipher's petrified physical form is still standing permanently frozen in the forest near Gravity Falls, Oregon, right where the reality distortion field collapsed around him. Stone. Still, an eye that can see more dimensions than anything around it, staring at a sky it cannot reach. Misses home and can't return, says he's happy. He's a liar. Get some rest, the ciphers will still be there in the morning. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.